Hello and welcome. I remember the first time I saw Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring. I had never seen any movie like that before, whether as an epic movie or as a fantasy movie. I did not know anything about Lord of the Rings. I never read any of the books, not even The Hobbits. The Fellowship of the Ring was my first introduction into the mind of Tolkien and how creative his writing was. What pulled me deep into the movie was that it felt like I was watching the movie of an RPG fantasy game. If you are a gamer and you know how fantasy RPGs are, there is usually the warrior, the archer, the healer or wizard, the dwarf, and maybe some other character class in between. This movie had all that. Aragorn the warrior, Legolas the archer, Gandalf the wizard, Gimli the dwarf, and the hobbits are the characters in between. While watching the first movie, I felt transported into this fantasy world that was so immersive and real at the same time. I felt like I was going on an adventure with the characters on screen, especially Frodo. So, let us explore Middle-earth through the eyes of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy. The Lord of the Rings trilogy was produced and directed by Peter Jackson and distributed by New Line Cinema. The movies are based on the books written by J.R.R. Tolkien. 3 books, 3 movies. One of the greatest inspiration of Tolkien's books was the Industrial Revolution. Tolkien loved nature and the earth, but was not too fond of the Industrial Revolution. He did not hate everything about the Industrial Revolution per se. He hated how it was destroying the environment which he loves. This is what inspired the creation of Isengard, and we see it play out in Lord of the Rings too, when Isengard was cutting down trees to build war machines and weapons.
A lot of the Lord of the Rings is about that, the destruction of forests and the rise of metal and machines. He hated machines. He said that the most evil creation ever visited on this world was the internal combustion engine. And he hated the idea of people being slaves to the machine. Like when we turn on the TV, the TV is controlling us now. We're slaves to the television.
Tolkien created the Lord of the Rings as mythology for England. The term mythology for England has been a topic of debate, as there are those who do not believe the Lord of the Rings is meant to be English mythology. But I think the books were written to fill a void. In the 5th century CE, the Anglo-Saxons inhabited and ruled territories that are part of England today. They were invaded by the Normans in the year 1066, which led to the near and total loss of the Anglo-Saxon written tradition. Tolkien wanted to fill that void of lost Anglo-Saxon written tradition and mythology with his work. That is why Peter Jackson treated the movies as historical movies rather than fantasy.
So Tolkien thought he wanted to create a mythology for his country, for England. And this is what he did. He spent his lifetime doing the stories of Middle-earth and the saga, and the history of the mythology, the concept, as he always says, he said, I imagine this took place in England and Europe some 7,000 or 8,000 years ago. And so we thought, okay, so what we'll do with the movie is we will pretend that this is history, just as if we were making an ancient Roman film or making Braveheart, about Sir William Wallace, that we'll pretend that these guys existed, it's history, it was real. That let's make the movie with that weight of authenticity in the designs, the look, the performances, everything. So that was our mantra.
Tolkien's love of languages would eventually lead to him creating his own, and his lifelong pursuit of creating such language engendered the desire to create his own mythology.
He felt deeply that England lacked a mythology.
Well, England has no overriding mythology. We have a lot of folk tales, and we have borrowed a lot of other people's mythologies. The one that everybody regards as English is the story of King Arthur. But actually that's a complete mishmash from different sources, many of them French, our old enemy. So for Tolkien, the Romance mythologies were a very difficult thing. He didn't feel that they should be part of English folklore or mythology at all.
He really mourned the fact that any mythology that England may have had been basically eradicated by the Norman invasion in 1066. There was this vacuum that Tolkien wanted to fill by inventing his own English mythology.
I know there are some things the movie did that were different from the books, but I want to focus on just the movies and how the movies try to interpret the books in a different way. Although the movies are not exactly the same as the books, Peter tried to be faithful to the source material as much as possible. They kept it all Tolkien.
As filmmakers, as writers, we had no interest whatsoever in putting our junk, our baggage into these movies. We just thought we should take what Tolkien cared about clearly, we should take those and we should put them into the film. This should ultimately be Tolkien's film, it shouldn't be ours.
The pre-production of the trilogy is one of the many things that made the trilogy as incredible as it is. The movies were all shot in New Zealand, which is the home country of Peter Jackson. They shot every movie back to back and spent over 274 days shooting. Total production time was around 5 to 8 years. When you watch the movies, it is obvious that a lot of love and passion was put into it. It will also surprise you that the Lord of the Rings trilogy almost never happened. The Lord of the Rings was originally supposed to be 2 movies, and they will shoot the movies back to back. If the first movie flops, it means the other movie will flop as well. This was a gamble a lot of studios did not want to take, especially for the budget. They pitched the idea to every studio in Hollywood and got rejected. The last studio they pitched the idea to was New Line Cinema. New Line Cinema agreed to make the movie, but they told Peter and his team to make it 3 movies instead of 2. The movies had the production team of around 2,400 to 3,000 people and 26,000 extras that worked on the movies for about 5 to 6 years. The art department alone had 300 people. That is incredible. They built 64 miniature sets. Some so detailed, the larger ones were known as bigatures. Peter decided that every single item in Middle-earth be made from scratch.
I mean, this was one of those movies where every single thing in the film had to be built. There was not one item we could go to a props warehouse and rent. And we had to also then think of the cultures, because The Lord of the Rings tells a multicultural kind of story. So in the Hobbits are eating with knives and forks. Now when you go to where the elves live, they've got knives and forks, but they have to be completely different, because those knives and forks, I mean, you know, so we studied, we thought, now if you're an elf and you're immortal and you live for 3,000 years, what would your knife and fork be like? I mean, what design influences would have steered you towards coming up with something that you use to cut your Brussels sprout with? So we put a huge amount of thought into the cultural design. I mean, Richard Taylor, Grant Major, Alan Lee, I mean, a lot of wonderful designers who fortunately are all people that are up to these Oscars now. So I'm so pleased that their work has been celebrated in that way, because I tell you, everything, thousands and thousands of things had to be made, all with a view to creating a fictitious cultural backgrounds to influence the design of these different places that we go to.
Peter also wanted the costumes and actors to give the audience a sense of authenticity. Peter did a good job making each race look distinct, not just in appearance, but in costume and environment. The elves look ethereal yet powerful. They are surrounded by trees and nature. They have this distinct architecture. The dwarves live in caves. Their architecture is symmetrical, boxy or rectangular, and bold. Minas Tirith, the city of kings, looks very majestic. The Wraith or the Nazgûl look frightening, dark and haunting. The costume and set design of Lord of the Rings is amazing. For a trilogy released over 20 years ago, these movies have aged like fine elvish wine. The CGI and practical effects, the acting, the pacing, the cinematography. The Lord of the Rings trilogy is a masterpiece. The first movie was released in 2001, the second movie in 2002, and the third in 2003. These movies are over 20 years old enough to drive in fact, and even old enough to get married in some cases. For movies released over 20 years ago, a lot of modern Hollywood movies do not come close to the perfection of the trilogy. Although in some places you can see that the CGI is not really that good, but for the most part, the CGI aged well. Peter Jackson relied more on practical effects than CGI. That is why the movie looks as good as it is today. I watched the making of and behind the scenes of this movie, and I was amazed by the way they used practical effects, camera tricks, and other techniques to make a lot of things possible in the production of this movie. And like I said, for a movie over 20 years old, some CGI moments still look very good. The Balrog still looks good today. That giant spider, I think it's a Shelob, still looks very good. The Nazgul still looks great. I mean, the part where the Nazgul was riding that flying beast. Then the Battle of Minas Tirith still looks excellent. I think the casting of The Lord of the Rings was good. Peter Jackson even said they had to get the casting right.
We were determined to get the casting right, that we had to cast people that felt like they had stepped out of the pages of the book. We didn't want to cast big stars because that is distracting. I mean, I think if you're taking characters from a famous book and bringing them to life, you don't want a huge superstar face because the book and the star don't gel. We wanted wonderful actors who are like chameleons who could just bring the characters from the book to life first and foremost.
The cast spent 18 months in New Zealand to shoot the movie, which was quite impressive. For someone like me who first saw the movies before reading any of the books, I believe Peter Jackson did an excellent job with the casting. But if you have read the books before watching the movies, you may have some issues with some of the casting, especially Aragorn and Frodo. At least that is what I have observed from the community, although some people don't mind the casting at all. From my understanding, Elijah Wood was too young to play Frodo as he was described in the books. Another issue is that Frodo was presented to be too weak and fragile. Andy Serkis as Smeagol is perfect. In fact, I would say Andy Serkis' performance as Smeagol is one of the best in the movie. We talk about how good the major casts were, characters like Sam, Legolas, Galadriel and the rest, but Bradford Dourif, I think that's his name, Bradford Dourif as Grima is exceptional. He did a very good job making me hate the character. That is how you know a good actor, someone that can trigger emotional response from the audience. Man, that guy made me hate Grima. That shows that guy is a good actor. I also want to acknowledge the performance of Karl Urban as Eomer. People hardly talk about how good his acting was in the movies. I see a lot of people had issues with Hugo Weaving as Elrond. They say he's too Agent Smith for Elrond. But like I said, if you've watched the movies before reading the books, you might not really see this as an issue. But if you have read the books before watching the movies, maybe you might have issues with Hugo Weaving as Elrond. The theme of the movies is the battle between good versus evil and light versus darkness. We also hear how the movie talks about the shadow growing in the east, the nameless fear and stuff like that.
Rumor grew of a shadow in the east, whispers of a nameless fear.
Another strong theme I observed is the idea of hope. The movie talks a lot about hope and does a good job illustrating hope in the most hopeless circumstances. Hope when it seemed hopeless in Helm's Deep. Hope when it seemed hopeless in Minas Tirith. Hope in Frodo as they marched to the Black Gate to distract Sauron so that Frodo could destroy the ring. Arwen stayed because of hope. When all seems lost, something good happens. Another thing I observed is that Lord of the Rings is also a story of redemption. There were some characters that had some kind of redemption arc in the movies. Boromir was presented as someone not as likable as Aragorn. He said, Gondor needs no king.
Gondor has no king. Gondor needs no king.
He tried to take the ring from Frodo, but he died saving Merry and Pippin and also called Aragorn his captain and king.
My captain. My king.
King Theoden also had a redemption arc. King Theoden's mind was poisoned by Saruman. Gandalf released King Theoden from the hold of Saruman, but King Theoden's mind was not completely healed. When the Uruk-hai marched towards Rohan, he retreated to Helm's Deep. He generally had a somewhat negative approach towards the war. He even refused to call for aid. But when the orcs almost completely overtook Helm's Deep, he finally came to his senses. He charged into the orcs with Aragorn and his fear of death disappeared. That was when Gandalf and Eomer, which is Theoden's nephew, that was when they did the Rohirrim charge to save Helm's Deep. King Theoden felt like he let his people down.
It was not Theoden of Rohan who led our people to victory.
But in the Battle of Minas Tirith, before the death of King Theoden, he found his redemption. Smeagol was also another character on the path to redemption. He swore on the Precious to act as a guide for Frodo and Sam. He even freed himself from the influence of the ring, or so we thought. But when Faramir threatened to kill Smeagol, Frodo saved his life. But Smeagol thought Frodo betrayed him, and because of this, Smeagol returned to his old ways. I wonder what would have happened to Smeagol if they did not encounter Faramir. Would Smeagol have been redeemed, or was it too late for Smeagol? The movies also showed the importance of unity. 3,000 years ago, when they fought against Sauron, elves and humans came together to fight against him. This time, they united as the Fellowship of the Ring. Rohan answered Gondor's call for aid. Basically, if there was no unity, they would have all failed. I remember the first time I watched the movies. There were those who mocked the movies because the idea of destroying a ring to defeat a Dark Lord made no sense to them. But it is obvious that the ring in the movies is symbolic. According to Tolkien, the ring signifies the loss of free will.
And he hated the idea of people being slaves to the machine. Like when we turn on the TV, the TV is controlling us now. We're slaves to the television. We're slaves to the motor car. The ring in the movie, in the book, the ring is a symbol for the loss of free will, that the ring takes away your free will.
The ring is an object of evil, and it takes away the free will of whoever possesses the ring, and the bearer of the ring becomes a host for evil. The bearer will be controlled by the ring to do the will of the ring. The movie says the Dark Lord puts into the ring his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life. You can only dominate all life if you take away their free will. The ring makes you think you can use it for good, but it will corrupt you. The road to hell is paved with good intentions after all. There were some characters in the movie who thought they could use the ring for good. Faramir wanted to use the ring to show his quality to his father. Boromir thought he could use the ring to save his people. Denethor, which is the father of both Faramir and Boromir, thought he could use the ring as a weapon against the Dark Lord to save his people. But there are those who outright rejected it. Gandalf refused to even touch the ring. Galadriel passed the test of the ring. Aragorn let Frodo go in order to protect Frodo from himself. When Frodo asked him, "Can you protect me from yourself?" Aragorn let him go. So we see many instances where there are people who desire the ring and they think they can use the ring for good. But we also see that there are those who were able to, for the most part, resist the temptation of the ring. And which also brings me to another point. The ring signifies temptation. The Lord of the Rings draws inspiration from Christianity, which also shows us how the devil tempts. When the devil wants to tempt you, he does not tempt you in such a way that you think you are doing something evil. He makes the temptation sound good. That is how the ring operates. It makes you think you can use it to do good, but it is actually trying to make you do evil. I said in the beginning of the video that one of the things that drew me to Lord of the Rings is that it felt like I was watching the movie of a fantasy RPG. If you have played RPGs, you know how amazing it is when you go on an adventure and you explore the map or the world the developers have created, especially if it's an open world game. The Lord of the Rings trilogy takes that feeling and dials it to 100. In the first movie, The Fellowship of the Ring, when they were to embark on the journey to Mordor to destroy the ring, you were about to go on a wild adventure with the characters of the movie. So many unknowns. What made the adventure even more interesting is the fact that Frodo and Sam got separated from the rest of the Fellowship, and they did not even know the way to Mordor. They had to find the way by themselves before Smeagol became their guide. The mystery of their journey was also mysterious to me as the viewer. This is similar to playing an RPG where the developers don't hold your hands, they don't show you any waypoints or point out everything in the map. You have to figure out everything by yourself. The feeling of discovering the world of Middle-earth with Frodo and Sam really gave me this sense of adventure. Also, each story in this movie was important. I was as interested in Aragorn's story as much as Frodo and Sam. I also wanted to know about King Theoden. I wanted to know about Faramir. Every story in this movie was important. When the movie cuts from an intense battle to the calm and depressing adventure of Frodo and Sam, I don't feel like it broke immersion. I want to know everything going on with everybody at the same time. The Lord of the Rings trilogy has two of the best battle sequences I have ever seen in cinema history. The first is the Battle of Helm's Deep. The second is the Battle of Minas Tirith. Let us start with Helm's Deep. The Battle of Helm's Deep is excellent and depressing at the same time. The pacing was perfect because of the build-up to the actual battle. There was this feeling of hopelessness, but they had to defend themselves anyway. Even when reinforcement came from the elves, the reinforcement was not enough. They were to fight against thousands of orcs. This was a battle of desperation. This was a battle of absolute hopelessness. And the battle is impactful because it was the final healing process of King Theoden, as he shared his fear of death and embraced it. Another reason why I love the Battle of Helm's Deep was the way Gandalf returned with Eomer and did the Rohirrim charge. The Rohirrim charge is one of the most beautiful scenes I have ever seen in cinema history. Absolutely amazing. The Battle of Helm's Deep took place at night, but it was visible. There are movies where they screw up night battle scenes or night scenes in general. In this Battle of Helm's Deep, you can see all the action and the activities while watching. They nailed it with the lighting. The use of practical effects and less CGI made the battle feel more real and more relatable. The production design also added to how realistic the battle was. The architecture of the fortress looks functional and believable, but also unique. The pacing of the battle was perfect. There were no weird, annoying jump cuts. You could see what was going on. This battle was just one of the best battles I have ever seen in cinema history. The second battle is the Battle of Minas Tirith. I also consider the Battle of Minas Tirith as one of the best battle sequences in cinema history. Although the battle was more visually appealing and the battle had a lot more things going on screen, I feel like it was not as impactful as the Battle of Helm's Deep. But one of the major reasons why I love the Battle of Minas Tirith is the constant turning of tide in the battle. For instance, the Orc took the city of Osgiliath. The city of Minas Tirith was almost overrun by orcs. Then the tide of the battle turned when King Theoden led the Rohirrim charge, which caused the orcs to run in retreat. Then the tide turned again when the Oliphants started attacking. They were kind of decimating Rohan's riders, although the riders held their own. Then the tide turned again when Aragorn showed up with the army of the dead. The major problem I have with this battle is that the army of the dead came in and deleted all the orcs, making the Rohirrim charge less impactful. The Rohirrim charge in the Battle of Helm's Deep was beautiful and amazing. We also see the Rohirrim charge again in the Battle of Minas Tirith. And why I love the Rohirrim charge in the Battle of Minas Tirith is the speech the king gave before the charge. That speech still gives me chills every time I hear it. If you were to put yourself in their shoes, you would realize there was no way they were going to win. They were ready to die. They were literally riding to their death. Some people underestimate the power of sound in media. Sound effects and the right music or score for a particular scene adds to the immersion of that scene. The Lord of the Rings has amazing sound effects. The sound of the wraith gives them this menacing and airy nature. The roars of the orcs makes them uncomfortable to fight. When the orcs attacked Helm's Deep, the chants of the orcs made the battle feel even more depressing and hopeless. The chanting of Grond was also menacing during the Battle of Minas Tirith. Howard Shaw was the composer of the score of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and this man is a legend. One of the best scores I have ever heard in cinema is the Rohirrim Charge song, emotional yet motivational. This whole song, along with the Rohirrim Charge, made me want to ride a horse and charge into battle. The movie has the perfect sound for tension, horror, excitement, battle sequences, peace and merriment. When we are with the elves, we hear a distinct kind of music. The race of men have their own music, as we see in Minas Tirith. Rohan has its own music. Isengard has its own music. Mordor and Sauron have their own music. The Nazgul have their own music. Nazgul when they were riding the horse, and the Nazgul when they were riding that flying monster. Speaking of sounds, if you are an upcoming artist and you want to share your music with the world, DistroKid is the best place to get you started. I compose music and I use DistroKid to distribute my songs. Their services are great and their customer support is fast and amazing. With only $22 a year, you can upload your music to all streaming platforms like Apple Music, Spotify, Deezer and the rest. You can upload as many songs as you want. You also get to keep 100% of all your earnings. To get started, click my affiliate link in the description to sign up and get 7% off your first subscription. By doing so, you are supporting the channel. So, let's get back to the video. The Lord of the Rings trilogy has impressive visuals and cinematography. When the movies introduce us to a place for the first time, we are given a good landscape view of that place. When we went to Rivendell, we see how the movie shows us Rivendell, so we can admire the place in all its glory. Same thing with Minas Tirith, Helm's Deep, Isengard, or any major location in any of the movies. Apart from landscapes, some scenes and action sequences have amazing visuals and cinematography. In the Battle of Minas Tirith, the battle against the Oliphants is visually impressive. The scene where Gandalf drove away the Nazgul attacking Faramir is very impressive. Aragorn charging towards the enemy in front of the Black Gate is visually impressive, and the way Shelob snuck up on Frodo, that is amazing cinematography. After talking about all the big and major stuff in the movies, there were some things I also observed while watching the movies. The movies are very long as 3 hours, and that is the theatrical version. If you watch the extended version or the director's cut, each movie can be as long as 4.5 hours. So if you want to watch the extended version of all 3 movies, you will spend around 12 to 15 hours. Although the movies are very long, I feel like they were not long enough. I did not want the movies to end. The movies were so good that I did not notice how long they were. If a movie is good and long, it feels short. If a movie is bad and short, it feels very long.
Potatoes, boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
At first, it all started as a promise Sam made to Gandalf when he said, "Don't you leave him, Samwise Gamgee." But it evolved from a promise to true friendship.
I made a promise, Mr. Frodo. A promise. Don't you leave him, Samwise Gamgee. And I don't mean to.
The story of Frodo and Sam also shows that great things can be done by little people, literally and figuratively. Great things can be done by ordinary people. You don't need to be a warrior, a king, or a prince. You just need determination and faith. One thing I love about this interview with Peter Jackson is that he said he wants you to be immersed in the movie itself. He understood escapism and it showed in the movie. When you start watching the movie, you escape reality and you are just lost in this fantasy world or this historical fantasy movie.
I tried as much as I possibly could with The Lord of the Rings to recreate that type of movie where the audience can just get lost and just go into the movie and just become part of the film.
Peter Jackson said Hollywood likes playing it safe and they don't like taking risks. They just recycle.
I think Hollywood is stopped taking risks. Hollywood has become a little bit safe and a little bit of recycling the stuff we liked. And in a sense, what I feel very proud about this particular year, and I really hope it helps influence films that are made all around the world, not just Hollywood, but it's actually interesting that down under, New Zealand and Australia, with Lord of the Rings from New Zealand and Moulin Rouge from Australia, that two films from that part of the world have, in a sense, they've reinvigorated their particular genres. That we did fantasy and Baz did the musical, and both films are being sort of celebrated in a way for for breathing new life into these genres. And I really would love to see more of that risk taking and imaginative kind of just go for it happening with some of the big budget Hollywood films that are being made, because they seem to have forgotten how to do that a little bit.
This was said in, I think, 2001 or 2002. If Peter was already saying Hollywood likes playing it safe back in 2001, I wonder what he will say about Hollywood today. We are in the era of reboots, remakes, remasters, prequels, sequels, and so on. He also said something: they did not want to put their own baggage in the movie. They kept it all Tolkien. None of their politics, none of their baggage was in the movie. They respected the source material.
Well, we didn't want to put any of our own, certainly in terms of the thematic material, we didn't want to put any of our own baggage. I mean, we had no interest in putting our messages into this movie, but we thought that we should honour Tolkien by putting his messages into it. And we thought he cared about things. The countryside and the rise of evil, and he cared passionately about certain issues. And we thought what we should do to honour him is to make sure that what he cared about ends up in the movie. That's what we tried to do.
But if you notice Hollywood today, Hollywood has this weird obsession of disrespecting the source material or trying to destroy intellectual properties. I don't know why they do it. Seriously, I will never understand Hollywood and why they keep doing this thing. So when Peter Jackson said Hollywood likes playing it safe, you saw that before the trilogy was made, a lot of studios rejected it because they were afraid of taking this risk. And New Line Cinema took the risk, and see the results. It became one of the best trilogy in cinema history. May God bless New Line Cinema for taking this project. If not, this movie would have not existed the way it is today. Thank God these movies were made the year they were made. I believe if the Lord of the Rings trilogy was made today, it will not be as good as it is. I don't know, I just feel like the quality of Hollywood has been declining. I want to even start a series on my channel called Revisiting Old Movies, where we watch old movies and then we talk about it, because I feel like older movies have this magic to it that Hollywood has lost. Look at Lord of the Rings. This movie is over 20 years old and it is still perfect. They should not even attempt to remake this movie. Do not remake this trilogy. This trilogy is perfect as it is. It is a timeless classic. So please leave it like this. Anyway, that's all I have for this video. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Is there anything I missed? Do you agree with some of the things I have said? What do you think about the Lord of the Rings trilogy? Do you think this is the best trilogy ever made? What do you think the ring signifies? I want to know your own theory. What do you think the theme of Lord of the Rings is? What do you think the theme of the trilogy is? I want to hear your comments. I want to hear your own opinion in the comment section below. So let us have our own discussion. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to slap the like button, subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you to those who have subscribed, and when you subscribe, don't forget to turn on the notification bell so that you'll be notified anytime I post videos like this. Don't forget to share the video, and I will see you in the next video.